Hi, my name is Fred Wheeler, and I run the How to D&D YouTube channel. And I am going to be covering The Lost Mine of Phandelver. This is a Dungeon Master tutorial. It covers pretty much everything that isn't necessarily in the adventure, because repeating stuff that you can already find in the adventure would be kind of like a waste of time for you. So I'm trying to cover things that aren't covered in there as much as I possibly can. And like everything that I do, these classes are set up with a very specific goal. Obviously, for the Dungeon Master, they're a guide for them. We're going to cover finding the entrance or entering the Cragmaw castle. So finding that castle, entering the castle, role-playing some of the important non-player characters, goblins, hobgoblins, grick, owlbear, bugbear, stuff like that, the doppelganger, various monsters, and obviously King Groll. Exploring the Cragmaw castle is probably one of the big factors. Defeating the monsters or population. The primary goal is to rescue Gundren Rockseeker. And to do that, I'm going to explain everything, and then I'm going to demonstrate everything, and then we're going to have a participation section at the end. There will be a Q&A for those of you who want to ask questions. Feel free to ask questions right throughout the entire presentation. I'm going to say it right now that the Lost Mine of Phandelver, the adventure, is now available free on D&D Beyond. And my understanding is it will stay free as access indefinitely, which means you can access the high resolution maps. If you're playing online, this should make it significantly easier for you to actually run your game if you're not playing in person. And I will attempt to sort of present all of the different things that you can utilize, like all of the monsters, their stat blocks and their information's generally also available for free on D&D Beyond. So pretty useful if you ask me. One of the better factors or features of Wizards of the Coast or Dungeons and Dragons buying D&D Beyond, which is good. I'm glad to see that happen. So the first thing I'm going to cover is, well, there's all of these plot cues or clues that direct the party to Cragmaw Castle to rescue Gundren Rockseeker. And they're sort of scattered throughout the adventure, making it fairly difficult to actually do anything with it. So you've got to go and collect them all up to figure out what's going on. So I'm going to pull up a map of that location so you can see where it is. As you can see, it is in the Neverwinter Woods. And this location probably by far has some of the more difficult issues with regard to finding it. So the first thing I'm going to say is that the first individual who could potentially direct the party to Cragmaw Castle is Clark the Bugbear, the leader at the Cragmaw hideout. He could tell the party where Gundren is being held prisoner, which you will see on page 8. The problem is that Clark needs to survive, and if he doesn't survive, or they don't actually interrogate Clark, they're never going to get that information. Glassstaff, the leader of the Red Brands, would also probably have information on the location of Cragmaw Castle and Gundren from the Bugbears in the Guard Barracks, Area 9 of the Red Brand hideout. So that will be page 24 to 26. So they have information. They probably pass that information over to Glassstaff as well. Now, also, because of that, it means the Bugbears in the Guard House, Area 9 of the Red Brand hideout, would also know, of course, the location of the castle if interrogated. Rudolph the Druid can also provide directions to Cragmaw Castle if asked by the characters, but then that would require them to go to the ruins of Thunder Tree, which means they're potentially facing a dragon very early on. And then there's Agatha the Banshee from Coneybury, might be able to tell the party how to find Cragmaw Castle if they decide to ask that question rather than ask the question that is directed in the quest, which is to find the spell book. So fail that quest and continue on your main quest. But then again, the party doesn't necessarily know that the Banshee knows the location of Cragmaw Castle, so they may not know to ask Agatha in the first place. Probably by far the easiest way to get your players to Cragmaw Castle if they miss all of the cues along the way is ultimately to have captured one or some of the Cragmaw tribe goblins. And they can reveal the location of that castle. See page 8. Look, what I would suggest to you is that These goblins are raiding along the roads, so it should not be difficult to go and ambush them at some point and get the information that you require in some way. So there is a few different problems with dealing with a castle, and probably it's really rough to have included something like this as a beginner adventure, frankly. I think it's highly cruel, in fact. But I guess all of us at some point, if we were playing Dungeons and Dragons, has had to go through this at some point. So therefore, it's going to happen. It's a rite of passage for everybody. And I guess your players, it's their turn today. So if we look at a castle, this is sort of like a rough draft drawing of the castle. It's not exact, okay, but basically the top half of the castle no longer exists. And that means that there's only really one level, and it's not necessarily protected from the weather. So there's a lot going on here. But so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about Cragmaw Castle, some of the strategies that people can use, dungeon masters and players, some of the problems with dealing with a castle, some of the solutions for dealing with a castle. And this is a different format to what I would normally do. I don't know that this will necessarily be the format that I keep in the future, but we'll try this format and see how it works. And if I feel like it's not going to work and it's too long, then I will chop it down and make adjustments to it. So the worst conceivable quest situation is when you require the party to assault or infiltrate a ruined castle full of goblins and monsters. It's even much worse if it's a castle that isn't ruined and all of its defenses are in place. Okay, so Cragmaw Castle is actually the climax of this adventure. Whether you realize it or not, ultimately, this is probably going to be the most exciting aspect of the adventure. Not Wave Echo Cave, not the ruins of Thunder Tree. And it's because they have a slim chance here to rescue Gundren Rockseeker. The castle is insane, frankly, for level 2 or level 3 characters to deal with. So players will need to be smart. Now, if you're dealing with new players, they're not necessarily going to play smart. They will probably make mistakes. If you have experienced players, it's probably going to be easier. There are 3 viable entry points into the castle. And those entry points are not necessarily obvious. You have to do a little bit of study to sort of realize what you're looking at here. But these pictures you will find on the internet. By scouring around, you'll probably find most of them. Ian, so if you're after them specifically, they're not mine to sort of give away. So I'm reluctant to sort of like just hand them out because I've pulled them from the internet for the purposes of this class, but I have no rights to any of this stuff. I'm just using them as a demonstration tool. Yeah, that's all I can sort of say with regard to that. If you type in the word Cragmaw Castle and do a bit of a search on Google, you may find those images. Okay, so look, I'm going to show you the picture of the map with the different locations because I think that's going to help a little bit and make it a little bit easier. And then we will go back, of course, to the battle map that I've got. But for now, there are 3 viable entry points. The castle entrance in the front, this is area 1. The postern gate, which I believe you'll find is to the south on the map. And there's also a canvas-covered ruined tower, which is to the north. There's a big open area to the north on the castle where they could enter as well. Now, the castle entrance can be infiltrated by being quiet and quick because the goblins in this location aren't watching for intruders effectively. I mean, ultimately, they aren't doing a really good job of actually staying actively perceiving and look, goblins are goblins. So deceiving the goblin sentries into letting the characters pass unmolested through the front door could be possible, but it's extremely unlikely to be successful without the right approach. So what would be the right approach for getting into here? Well, I think ultimately what you're looking to do is the party needs to disguise themselves as Red Brand bandits or as glass staff or as both. It has the best chance of success, but it also requires that the players have defeated the Red Brands first, or at least some of them, discover that the Red Brands and the Cragmaw tribe are all working together and for the Black Spider. And if they haven't done that, then they may not necessarily have anything to pretend that they're somebody else. So King Groll could be paid off with a large payment of tribute. So if you transport on, say, pack mules to release Gundren Rockseeker, if you decide to sort of, your players decide to have a chat in the front rather than assault the castle, which would be not a good idea. Look, well, right now, King Groll is negotiating the price. So because King Groll is renegotiating the price with, I think it's Verith the doppelganger, which is actually disguised as a drow. That doppelganger would sabotage the plan, obviously, if the players try to bribe King Groll. But it's certainly a way to get yourself in. But will the players have enough goods and money to actually bribe the king? Probably not. Now, a frontal assault on the castle with goblins and hobgoblins hiding behind arrow slits is a disastrous idea, unfortunately. And frankly, I think a lot of people will probably not go for this technique anyway. But look, let's get real. The reality is that some players do foolish things and then have to figure out that they have made the wrong decision. One of the things that needs to be obvious to anybody when you're dealing with a castle, and look, this is a meme I have created, and I'm going to put it up so you can sort of see. I think the image tells you everything. Now, this castle they're dealing with is not in good shape, right? So it's not like it is well fortified. It is run down. So it's a different kettle of fish. But to illustrate it, what about if the party tries to rally the townsfolk to lay siege to the ruined castle? They will find themselves with commoners who are not equipped or brave enough really for such a task. They're not skilled in that area. What about mercenaries? So you could actually, the players have probably got enough money, they could potentially hire mercenaries to actually fight with them to assault this castle if they decide to assault it. By going to Neverwinter or Waterdeep, there would be mercenaries. So how much does that cost? Actually, it's not very much. I will kind of discuss that though. The best strategy for the party is to sneak into the castle though, through 2 of the 3 entry points at night and infiltrate the fortress by essentially being covert SEAL team operatives. But it's still very dangerous. It's still risky. If a character is lightly or heavily obscured, they can attempt to stealth in the dark, even against monsters who have dark vision. And if you're wondering, like, where did you get this from, Fred? So I want you to go to page 177 of the Player's Handbook. There is a sidebar that says hiding. And in the hiding section, it says clearly. You need to see clearly. So if you can't see clearly, like, the problem is you can't see clearly when you have dark vision and darkness because it's considered dim light. So that means light obscurity. That's not seeing clearly. Okay, so you can hide in that still. Climbing the castle walls at night with a grappling hook and rope would also be another option for entering the location, but it doesn't have a roof anymore. So it's not like you're entering from the roof. You won't necessarily know as a player which is the best entry side to come from when you throw your grappling hook up. So it has some problems. Even if you climb the castle walls from the outside and hook up a rope so that you can just clamber down, are you going to wind up picking a location where there are monsters just below you? You won't know. The amount of enemies in the castle is extremely high, and the player characters will not be aware of this terrible fact, frankly. A single battle can create enough noise to result in the entire castle population descending on the party, while goblins can call for help or flee to get reinforcements the entire time. This makes it extremely difficult for players to deal with, which is why I always sort of discourage people from thinking that a castle is no big deal, because it is a big deal. One of the, I guess, the factors that comes into play more often than not that people fail to consider is that when you're dealing with a castle, it's like a puzzle. It is a true puzzle in every respect. okay? Which means that there are multiple things that you can do if you want to deal with that situation, but not all of them are going to be the best situation to utilize. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of cover the last little bit that sort of breaks down some of the information you might need as a dungeon master. I've kind of given you a lot of hints and tips that you can share with your players. So dungeon masters are recommended to make a list of each room's occupants that can join an ongoing battle in waves, because this has happened to me. It's probably going to happen to you, which will likely occur eventually. I mean, even if it doesn't happen straight away and they manage to dispatch people or monsters quickly or deceive them and they get past them without having to do any kind of fighting, it's only a matter of time before something's going to happen. So it's always a good idea to have a list, and you can just cross off the monsters off the list so you know who won't be joining the battle. A very small group of characters are at the greatest risk, but I have seen a group of 3 experienced players butcher all of Cragmaw Castle, all the monsters in here, with some great tactics and some very lucky dice rolling. Like, frankly, they were significantly luckier than I was expecting. Now, old gamers will likely realize that their characters are better off to hire mercenaries to help fight. Now, as long as you allow this as an option, what is the cost of hiring a mercenary in Dungeons & Dragons 5e? It's actually only 2 gold pieces per day when tackling a castle. Like, if they wanted to go and do that, they could hire them. Now, the information on hiring somebody who is trained is on page 159 of the Player's Handbook. I would select one of the lowest level NPCs who are fighters. You may decide that it could be a guard or a bandit or something like that. That would be considered a mercenary in this case. It's not going to be the top tier skilled individual. It's probably better if they select somebody who has ranged attacks rather than just a melee attack, but they could be utilized. Now, mercenaries that have been hired can help the party to assault the castle from any position, or they could be used to help infiltrate the castle in some way. Now, whether that is by deception or by just sneaking in at night and then making the rounds, it's still an option and easy to access. Like, seriously, the mercenary stat block could be taken from the monster manual. You could use any of the non-player character section stuff there: an acolyte, a scout, a guard, the cultists, a bandit, even a tribal warrior. And that's all on page 342 to 350 of the monster manual. For those of you who are wondering, what could they use as mercenaries if they decide to hire mercenaries? Allow for a clearance of about, I would say, 60 feet, okay, from the castle walls, and at the edge of the forest, the edge of the forest, because this thing is actually situated in a forest, so there should be a clearance of about 60 feet, and then you get the forest. So that means that the player characters can use the forest to sneak around the entire castle without being spotted. They don't need to necessarily go out into the open. Gundren is usually under Grold or King Grold's knife, or already dead when the party arrives, making the situation extremely more, like, so much more difficult and very hard to resolve successfully. Just because as soon as they make too much noise and people start running back and letting Groll know what's going on, then, like, Gundren's life is probably not worth very much at this point. And so he's either going to be used as a bargaining chip, which will make it very difficult for the players, or he's already been killed. And there's some other things can happen here. Like, what happens if somebody decides to disguise themselves as the dwarf? Like, there's a doppelganger in this room. That doppelganger might decide that they are going to disguise themselves as Gundren. Goblins and hobgoblins are quite treacherous, and they will also, because they're situated like in the front of the castle here and over here in the section here, like, they're everywhere. They're going to try to lure the player characters deeper into the castle to bring the whole castle tribe into the fight. And they're going to use those hit and run tactics with nimble escape, because they can disengage as a bonus action, making them like super difficult to deal with. I'm going to break down each location very, very quickly. And if there's any questions, by all means ask. Because I still want to do a Q&A. I think this is probably one of the more difficult locations to deal with. And so we'll go through this one by one. So first off, section 1, right over here. This is the castle entrance. Again, read out or paraphrase the box text, and then make sure you ask the players what they want to do. This is always a big factor of everything. I'm going to say this a lot of times, you know this. This entry point really is for the stupid players or the very new players who don't know any better. And I'm not saying that you should stop people from doing this, but it's by far the worst strategy. And you can expect all sorts of bad things to happen. Shooting through an arrow slit is a real pain. It really is, because it's hard to hit somebody on the other side. Area 2, which is right here, this is where we have a trap set up. This trap is right there. So when they get into this section, you're going to read out or paraphrase the box text, ask the players what they want to do. Again, we want them to make sure you have a marching order, probably going to be very useful to you. The trap is intended to alert the entire castle's monsters, and it is the worst path to take through the ruins. Even if they're using infiltration, it's still probably the worst path to take. Player characters will rightly get thrashed if the trap is actually triggered. The trap is actually pretty easy to find if the players are looking for it, but if they're not looking for it, it's not. And ultimately, it's not going to be very easy to find if they're using their passive perception, because the DC is so high, unfortunately. Okay, so area 3, there are 2 locations. These are the archer posts, okay, right here in the front here of the castle. So with regard to them, again, make sure to read out or paraphrase the box text only when they actually open the door to this location, okay? Make sure you ask the players what they want to do. The 2 archer posts grant all the goblins a +5 cover bonus to their armor class or AC when shooting through the arrow slits, which means potentially a goblin with no shield on and using a bow is going to have an armor class of 13. Okay, so an armor class of 13, but that's not the only thing you're contending with. Even though they're not wearing that shield, goblin armor class AC, that's 13 with a bow. Then you add 5. You're now dealing with an 18 armor class for a goblin. Like, that's really hard to deal with. So when they're shooting through those arrow slits, it's entirely possible for them to wipe out the entire party by doing that. The goblins can block the doors if they want to. There's doors here. They can block the doors with furniture if they wanted to, or a brace of some kind, or just their body weight. So don't assume that they can just open the door freely. So how would you deal with a problem like that? Like, how am I going to contend with this? Well, you're going to use a strength or athletics check for your player characters. They need to use either, it's either going to be strength or athletics. It's not going to be a dexterity check of any kind. And it's going to be contested by the goblins. Okay, so this is what we're looking at, is a situation where you contest strength, and the goblins will also be using strength or athletics in this case to try to hold the door closed. Does that make sense? And with a contest, to be successful, you have to get greater than your opponent. So I recommend letting the players run away if they need to. If they get into the situation in here and things aren't going well, let them run away. Don't shoot them as they flee, unless you really feel like it's necessary to do that. Okay, so area 4 here, which is the ruined barracks. Again, when you enter into this location from either point, make sure to read out or paraphrase the box text. Make sure you ask the players what they want to do. The ruined barracks have 4, is it 4 goblins? 4 goblins? Did I miss a goblin? Somehow I must have missed a goblin. I feel like there's a goblin missing from here. One of my goblins has run away. Okay, so I've only got 3 goblins here, but there's supposed to be 4 goblins here. Yeah, we'll put that over there for now. Yeah, 4 goblins. Solved that problem. That was easy. So with them, these 4 goblins are intended to be reinforcements that can be dispatched to any location in the castle when they hear a call for help or somebody as a runner comes and seeks them out. Okay, so 1 goblin will be doing the seeking out of reinforcements usually, while the other 3 are fighting whatever bad battle there is to fight. Provided that, and look, there's only really 2 ways they can go. They can go through this door, or they can go through this gap. And goblins could do that. But if the players have managed to block off those two points, they won't be able to get past them very easily. So then area 5 is like a storage location. This is over here, okay? So when they open the door to this location, there's a couple of different ways in. There's 3 doors into this room. So read out or paraphrase the box text, ask the players what they want to do. The storage room is an opportunity for your player characters to gain hit points by drinking the brandy, but are more likely to wind up getting poisoned by drinking far too much brandy, unfortunately. I recommend that only have 1 player character getting poisoned at a time, if it actually happens. So if you wind up with a player who starts drinking stuff, let the other players see that somebody else is starting to get poisoned so that they don't wind up doing it themselves. So just to bear in mind that, you know, it would be cruel if everybody started drinking down the brandy thinking they were going to get lots of hit points and suddenly everybody's poisoned and then they would try and continue on through this location. I mean, it does happen. And if it does happen and things are really looking bad for them, you know, like they could always bug out and try again some other day. Now, although Sildar Hallwinter's armor and weapons are supposed to be the main benefit in this room, the party will likely have better gear already than what Sildar Hallwinter has, but they could pick that up and take it back with them. If Sildar Hallwinter is with them, then he could wear that if he wanted to. I don't know that necessarily donning or doffing armor in the middle of a occupied castle is a good idea. It would probably make a lot of noise, so you probably don't want to do that. But at least grabbing the weapons is something that would be useful to you. And I'm sure Sildar Hallwinter will appreciate his gear coming back to him if you manage to do that. Okay, so Area 6, which is the Hobgoblin Barracks, which is way over here. When they open the door to this location, read out or paraphrase the box text as normal, ask the players what they want to do. The barracks have 4 well-trained hobgoblins that stay in here. And they stay put unless a goblin calls for help. Like, I wouldn't have them move unless a goblin calls for help. Hobgoblins are probably the greatest threat with multiple attacks and better armor than normal goblins. So if you were thinking that just 4 of them is no big deal and that there are bigger threats in the castle, it's probably not true. I think you'll find this is a tough fight for them. Area 7. Area 7 looks bad, but actually it can work out really well. And I think you'll find that most players will understand what the best strategy for this location is. So read out or paraphrase the box text, ask the players what they want to do when they get into here. There are 3 different locations, 3 different entry points into this room. There are 8 devious goblins, but killing the leader is the secret the players' characters need to figure out to ensure that the rest flee from the castle. Now, it says have them flee east and west and so forth. I would have them leave the castle, like just bug out completely. You still award experience points as normal, but it just makes it significantly easier for them to deal with the rest of the threat, rather than have them move to another location to reinforce existing troops. I recommend describing the difference between the goblin leader and the other goblins so that they understand that is the goblin leader, and maybe they need to target the goblin leader rather than fighting every single goblin until they finally defeat the leader. So, you know, if they have a chance to defeat the leader, then they may be able to force the rest to flee, which is what the adventure sort of talks about. Area 8, which is the Dark Hall, which is over here. This is the Dark Hall. Again, there is like 2 entry points. Now, you're probably wondering about this rubble here. Like, can they move across the rubble? That's up to you. I would say probably not. I think you'll find that the rubble is... There's no indication of like how high it is or how difficult it is to deal with, as far as I can remember in the adventure. So this is the Dark Hall. We'll deal with that. The hall with the Grick waiting to ambush its next meal can be distracted from fighting the party. All they need to do, they don't need to roll any dice. They just need to throw it some rations or food and then flee. And it will just eat the food and leave them be. If they throw food at it and then still try to attack it, then it's probably going to attack them. But they can get away from actually having to fight this thing, full stop. They don't need to worry about dealing with this threat. Okay, so Area 9, which is the Goblin Shrine over here, which I don't have another... Oh, I do. Yep. Well, I did. Yeah, there we go. I found another goblin. Okay, so the Goblin Shrine, Area 9. Read out or paraphrase this box text. Ask the players what they want to do. These here are little curtains. There's a door here. So there's 3 entry points, essentially, although you might say there's only 2. The shrine has 3 cowardly goblins that can be avoided by just leaving. Like if they come across them, these goblins probably won't pursue them or attack them. They may certainly seek out help. Calling for help is something they would definitely do. But the goblins don't pursue the party. It's only 3 goblins. Okay, so they can go and seek help, but they probably won't pursue the party. Probably difficult to actually just peek in here, see them there, and then go on from there. But listening at the curtains might actually work. They might discover that there's somebody behind there. These goblins are probably talking. It's not like they're trying to actively be quiet. Okay, Area 10. This is this area here. This is sort of on the outside. I don't know why are we talking about the postern gates? Well, the postern gate's actually really important. So when they get here, I want you to read out or paraphrase the box text, ask the players what they want to do. The gate is a reasonable entry point as long as the characters don't knock on the door. If they knock on the door, it's all over, okay? And if they decide to knock the door down or break the door down with force, that's also going to be not going to work for them. That is going to cause a lot of trouble. Breaking down the door will draw goblins from Area 7, which is here, and there's plenty of them, and the hobgoblins from Area 12 over here. And it's a funnel point, and there's a lot of them. And for a party of potentially level 2 or 3, it's a difficult situation to deal with. Right, so Area 11 is probably the one entry point that I think is the best out of all of them. So when they come to here, if they manage to find the canvas that's hiding the entry point, if they figure out that there's something here, I want you to read out, paraphrase to the players what they see, and ask them what they want to do. The ruined tower offers the best entry point, as I said, but requires that the party do a recon of the castle exterior at night with stealth. It's probably the best time to do it. They will obviously still have disadvantage or a -5 to their passive perception when making perception checks, just because they are dealing with night. Even with dark vision, doesn't make any difference. If they start using torches and light sources, then that's going to kind of give them away to all of the goblins on watch. So that's probably not a great idea. They're really going to need to keep their light sources down to a bare minimum if possible. The goblin and hobgoblin sentries have disadvantage on perception checks, just like the characters. So it's not like it can't be done. They can achieve it. The benefit of light or heavy obscurity and darkness is going to apply to anybody. It doesn't really matter. Okay, I've kind of talked about that sort of thing before. Okay, so then Area 12 over here. Area 12. When they come through, there's a curtain over here. They could enter from here. They could enter from this door over here. I think you'll probably have some people who'll try to climb through an arrow slit. Nobody's going to be small enough to get through an arrow slit. Like, there aren't tiny playable characters in Dungeons and Dragons 5e, unless, of course, they've used a spell, which I think is probably unlikely at their level to get through that space. So it's not really an entry point, the arrow slits. So when they get into here, you want to read out or paraphrase the box text, ask the players what they want to do. The tower has 2 vigilant, military-trained hobgoblins who watch out of the arrow slit. Now, they might not both be looking out of that arrow slit all the time, but they would take watches. Like, one would be sleeping or resting, and while the other one is on watch. Now, hobgoblins are not like goblins. They take their job seriously. They are military trained. So they will be much harder to get past. You really have to make sure you use the forester's cover and night to get past these little suckers. So cover of night, circling the castle from the forest edge is required by the party to deal with these little pains in the butts. And as I said, they would take shifts. All right, so now one of the more funny locations is Area 13, which is the Owlbear Tower, which is over here. Sorry, I'm going to move this out of the way for you. I'm going very fast, by the way. So we'll see how we go. Should give you plenty of time to ask questions. So there's really only one entry point, which is this door. So read out or paraphrase the box text, ask the players what they want to do, as always. The tower has a trapped, hungry owlbear who will roar at intruders and alert the castle forces. So as soon as they open the door, the adventure indicates that the owlbear will call out or roar. And that's a problem, because the last thing you want to do is draw attention. Also, too, to get here is probably going to require dealing with the hobgoblins first, right? So those hobgoblins are probably gone at this present time. They've either been defeated or they've been tied up, knocked out, or something like that. So how do you deal with a situation where there's an owlbear? If they're doing their job properly, then the easiest way to deal with the owlbear, so you don't have to fight the owlbear, because it's a difficult beast to deal with, is to close the door straight away. The players' characters can do this. Like, you open the door, you close the door. Best solution, stops the owlbear from pursuing them, and they don't need to worry about too much else after that. And then you just move on. Now, it doesn't change the fact that the owlbear has roared, so somebody may come looking to find out what the owlbear is up to, but I'm sure that more than a few individuals within the castle aren't foolish enough to open the door just in case the owlbear tries to knock them over and eat them, or try to escape. So smart players could listen at the door and hear a squawking beast or some sort of noise, and that may be enough to indicate to them not to open the door. And then potentially, if they don't open the door, they don't alert the castle population. There's no guarantee that players will do that sort of thing, but that's actually the simplest way. There's two ways of dealing with it. You open the door, you close the door, no owlbear to fight. End of story. Will it keep making noise? Potentially, but it's kind of, the damage has already been done. Or you listen at the door, you realize there's something bad behind there, you don't open the door, you move on. And then maybe if you decide later on to come back, once you've dealt with actually its rescue and gundren rockseeker, then maybe you open this door and find out what's going on in there. So that's that location there. Then the last location, which for the life of me, I may have actually forgotten what it's called. It is the King's Quarters. Right, so I've made a mistake here. I will fix that later. So the King's Quarters is over here. So there are two entryways, two doors you could use. So a couple of different pathways that you can be taken. Read out or paraphrase the box text. Ask the players what they want to do, as always. The King's Quarters is the home of King Groll, which is a bugbear. He has a pet wolf called Snarl, and there's a doppelganger who won't look like a doppelganger. Doppelganger is actually in the adventure stated as looking like a drow, and so therefore it will look like, now a drow is basically a dark elf. Now the doppelganger could be disguised as a drow, potentially talking with Groll, the bugbear, or if the players have made too much noise and given themselves away, then the doppelganger might decide to kill Gundren, hide his body, and disguise themselves as the dwarf. If the party makes too much noise in the castle, or runners come and inform them of what's going on. Now, this really makes things much more complicated. I've heard of people doing this before. It's also possible, even if they don't alert Groll and the doppelganger here of their presence, that when the fight breaks out, that the doppelganger or even Groll manages to make a swing at Gundren, who's in a bad way, and kills Gundren, like end of Gundren. But yes, potentially one of the worst aspects is if the doppelganger hides the body of a dead dwarf and disguises themselves as Gundren, you could wind up with gundren being a poison pill or infiltrating your party and then causing all sorts of trouble later on, potentially. No guarantee that'll happen, but you never know. So there's a couple of different ways it can work. Okay, so let's deal with the aftermath of Cragmaw Castle. There's a couple of things to consider. I'm only going to cover 4 different areas that I think are kind of important to you, and that is the returning war band is overkill, frankly, and better to use only if the player characters have taken a long time to deal with the castle, more time than you really think it is necessary, or have been resting during the exploration, or you're dealing with a party, a large group of players, and they haven't really been challenged by the castle. Look, if you have 7 players, they may actually breeze through this pretty easily. But it is tooled for characters between more level 3, but level 2, 4 or 5 players, and they can usually deal with this location with smart play. Now, dealing with the aftermath of defeating King Groll, the bugbear, and rescuing gundren rockseeker might result in the party being infiltrated by a doppelganger for the rest of the adventure, because you don't ever need to reveal that the doppelganger is not in fact gundren rockseeker. I want to point out that your player characters are supposed to be friends with gundren rockseeker, so there is the opportunity for players to figure it out and for you to play that out if you wanted to. The treasure from King Groll's quarters don't require a perception check to find, so don't worry about rolling any dice. Just looking under the mattress is fine. I would say feel free to add additional items if you think it would be helpful. There's nowhere that it says that you shouldn't do that sort of thing. Now, awarding experience points is indicated by the adventure already in the details, or just advance the characters another level when King Groll is defeated and gundren rockseeker is rescued, or King Groll is defeated and this location is dealt with, and maybe even if gundren rockseeker dies, they can still be awarded another level, because it's quite a high possibility that might happen. Now, if King Groll is captured and gundren is rescued, you can still award. It's not like you need to only advance the characters by killing the main villain in this location or antagonist.